firsthand what it would be like to run a business. The discussion includes how to write checks and paying for the monthly rent.
They did great. Did you guys, how much did you think the rent was? Did you think it was $10,000?
I was like $1,600.
So we have how many?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
But before those field trips, the group learns the basics in more formal educational situations.
For us, we feel like if we do excursions and classes and whatnot, they will focus more, they'll retain it better, and they'll actually enjoy learning.
The goal is to give students some freedom.
Their attention span is really short. So if we can do something with the fidget game or something with the counting the blocks, it keeps their hands and their minds engaged.
This way of learning has been so successful for the families that these moms decided to turn their homeschool co-op into a nonprofit.
These are the options we found. You can either become a 501c3 or a 508c1a. And so we're like 2024, things are crazy expensive. And so I think if we can make it free for families, then no family can ever say like, hey, I can't go because I can't afford it.
So now the students are gearing up for their next field trip. They're creating tie-dye scrunchies and shirts to sell at their own market while using their new finance and business skills.
The stuff that we teach them is real life skills that they're not learning at public school.
These moms aim to make a difference by pushing their students to focus on real life experience. In Sarasota, Julia Hazel, Spectrum News.
I'm Bree Driscoll. Thanks so much for watching. Your Spectrum News in 90 is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum.
The 2024 election will decide who leads our nation and the balance of power in Congress, impacting all of us. From Capitol Hill to the Oval Office, let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth coverage with our dedicated experts in local politics. Strengthening democracy by informing your community. That's our mission. Available on all of your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
Running a small business means running marketing and sales and inventory and customer service and handling pretty much every single thing that comes up, ever. All-in-one small business owners need all-in-one connectivity to make it all work. Spectrum Business is made to work for small business. Get one advanced solution for the lowest price with Spectrum One for Business. Fast, reliable internet, free advanced Wi-Fi with Security Shield, and a free mobile line, all for only $49.99 per month. You're doing it all and can trust that Spectrum Internet and over 99.9% network reliability, plus advanced Wi-Fi with Security Shield to provide 24/7 cyber protection. And get a free mobile line to stay connected all the time. Get Spectrum One for Business. One advanced solution with all the connectivity your small business needs for the lowest price. Only $49.99 per month. Call 855-581-6858 today. Spectrum Business, made to work.
The family's visit to the forest inspired a beautiful question. Mother, mother, am I a tree? You tell me to stand tall. You tell me to stay rooted. I think I am a tree. My child, of course you are. But what kind of tree will you be? The kind to hug or the kind to climb? Doesn't matter what you choose, so long as you choose to be a tree that's kind.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one to discover.
Good morning, I'm Bree Driscoll, and you're watching special coverage here on Spectrum News. The Supreme Court just released a ruling which could have major implications on hundreds of people who were charged for the January 6 riots at the Capitol. The justice's ruling makes it harder to charge the riot defendants with obstruction, a charge former President Donald Trump is facing. I'm joined now by constitutional law professor from Campbell University, Gregory Wallace, and Washington, D.C. reporter Kevin Fry, who is outside the Supreme Court. Kevin, let's begin with you. Can you break down this decision for us?
As part of the reaction and response to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, the government pursued a variety of indictments against hundreds of individuals and often relied on this provision of obstructing justice, arguing that by obstructing the official proceedings, that is, counting the electoral votes, ultimately they obstructed justice. Supreme Court stepping in and basically saying, you at the lower courts need to reevaluate how you're interpreting that statute, because someone basically said this shouldn't apply in the case of breaking into the Capitol. And now they're instructing the lower court to perhaps narrow the definition of obstruction of justice, or obstruction of an official proceeding, rather, citing the fact that the provision, at least previously, at least under kind of the way the statute is written, seems to apply more so to court cases and a more narrow collection of acts. Courts are going to have to reevaluate these cases. You could see the DOJ have to force to provide additional evidence to kind of explain why these cases should stand. And so now hundreds of cases involving January 6 rioters are now in question.
Good, thank you. All right, thank you, Kevin. Let me bring you in here now. Professor Wallace explains what happens to the individuals who have this charge against them and have been convicted of this charge. It's not like they're suddenly set free here, that, you know, or the charge is erased. What happens now with them?
Well, the charges were based on an overbroad reading of this statute to include any obstruction of a government proceeding. And what the court says today is that obstruction has to impair the integrity or availability of government records, documents, or other similar types of things. And now what's going to happen, and the government's going to have to prove that the obstruction was related to these documents or records. It's not just obstruction in general, but it has to be connected to impairing the availability or integrity of these government records.
All right, thank you, Professor Wallace. Kevin, let me bring you back in here. How does this relate to the charges that former President Trump is facing right now in relation to this?
Right. So as part of the multitude of cases that Trump is facing on the various levels of government, both in Georgia and federally speaking, in the federal case involving January 6th and his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, at least one of the charges deals with the obstruction of an official proceeding because, again, of the attack and the ultimate delay of the counting of the electoral votes. So this also throws into question that particular charge. Again, I'll defer to the constitutional law expert, but it will have to then lead to some reinterpretation. One other thing that's kind of worth noting about how this case came down is that this is not strictly along, shall we say, partisan lines on the court. You saw one of the liberal justices joining with most of the conservatives in deciding that basically the lower courts need to reassess how this statute is applied, whereas you saw Amy Coney Barrett, one of Trump's own appointees on the court, one of the conservative members, joining with two of the liberals in dissenting against this majority ruling.
And Kevin, I have a follow-up question for you. What does this do to the conversation, really the political rhetoric around January 6th?
Well, I found it interesting just reading through kind of the summary that leads off all Supreme Court opinions, that it very explicitly laid out, one, that it was Trump supporters who were at the Supreme Court, which is one of the conspiracy of Trump land, that these were planted folk that were running amok on Capitol Hill. On top of that, though, this then gives arguably some conservatives and Trump fodder for their argument that they have made for the better part of several years now, that these January 6 defendants have the law being thrown at them in an unjust and unfair way, and they're being dragged by the Department of Justice. So it only perhaps fuels that conversation, with the Supreme Court providing some of the fodder.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And Professor Wallace, I want to ask you about some of the controversy that is surrounding the court in January 6th, specifically some of the flags that have flown outside of Justice Alito's house. Can you explain how that might kind of be looked through this decision might look through the lens of that, and how people might be critical of this decision?
Yeah, I don't know that the flying of flags outside have to do with January 6th. I think first of all, they were flown by Justice Alito's wife, who has right under the First Amendment of the Constitution to express herself. But even I think some people were trying to put some sinister interpretation on that. But I think the court here is, as I've read this opinion, is giving a very logical interpretation. It even gathered the vote of Justice Jackson, who is a liberal justice on the court. And I think what it means is simply this, that the government's going to either have to dismiss these charges or recharge people and show that how the obstruction of a government proceeding here affected certain government records or documents. So that's going to be a little bit harder to prove. It doesn't necessarily mean that these charges go away.
All right. Thank you, Professor Wallace. Last day of decisions for the court, correct?
Correct, but we now know when the last day is going to be. Chief Justice John Roberts, at the end of today's sitting, after they read through the last of these releases today, announced that Monday is the last day of the term. And so that means Monday we're going to get a handful of high-profile cases. There will be some social media-related cases, but perhaps the most important one that everyone is keeping an eye on is that immunity case involving Donald Trump and whether or not he is immune from conviction and immune from criminal prosecution on some of the actions related to January 6th that were pursued while he was in the Oval Office. And that is the crux of the special counsel's investigation into Donald Trump. And so the federal case involving his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results has basically been on ice for months now as we wait for this exactly what Trump is immune from or what he is not immune from. And so on Monday, we will finally get at least some semblance of an answer as to what exactly the court has decided there and whether or not, on a very tight timeline, we might see Trump back in trial before November.
All right, so we have a day. We know when it's going to happen. We just don't know what the court is going to say at this point. All right, I want to thank you, Professor Gregory Wallace and Kevin Fry at the Supreme Court. Excellent context into this very complicated case with a lot of political ramifications. I want to thank you for your time and insight, and thank you at home for watching. I'm Bree Driscoll. More news right now here on Spectrum News.
Here's the deal. In this election year, people